No one wants to be talking about a project or something they're responsible for and be speaking about it in terms of sort of, kind of, maybe, right? So often we say, probably, well, we'll probably meet our goals, or, I might be able to get that to you by the end of the week. How helpful is that?
Welcome to A Better Lifestyle. I am your host, Richard, and I will be with you throughout this journey. This show is here to empower individuals to do more in life professionally. You will find a variety of topics that will help you to be more productive and more successful. So join me and the professionals from different industries as we bring education and knowledge for more success.
Hi, everybody. My name is Richard. Welcome to A Better Lifestyle. Today's topic is words, why words matter. So the way we speak, because sometimes the way we speak can affect our lives in a positive and in a negative way. So this is what we'll be talking about. Just to say, this is the third time I'm trying to record this episode with my guests. I had some issues on my side. So now it's fixed. Hopefully everything is going to be okay. So I'm trying to choose the right words so everything is going to be okay. So my guest is Terry. So Terry, please introduce yourself to the people, a brief resume of who you are, and we'll take it from there.
Okay. Well, Richard, three's a charm. So I'm so happy that we got into this third conversation. So Terry Short, and I am the founder of the Thriving Leader Collaborative. And I've been at leadership for decades, and my leadership career caused me to write a book about the words we choose. So I'll tell you about that in a minute. But basically, in my early 20s to early 30s, I had a career in hospitality. And I went through the ranks with Four Seasons hotels and lots of leadership positions. And then I started my own business. I had my own business for 15 years. So out of hospitality and consulting in hospitality, but doing a lot of leadership development. And from there, I transitioned into healthcare, which was an interesting transition. So instead of using my skill set to take care of the rich and famous, the lots of guests that we had, now I was using my skill sets to help with the most vulnerable in healthcare and such. And so that was a great opportunity for me. And in 2019, I stepped back out of the corporate world and into my own business again. And in 2020, I wrote my book, The Words We Choose, Your Guide to How and Why Words Matter. And I've been talking about it ever since, Richard.
Great. So we're going to jump in right into the topic. So why words matters?
Well, because as you said in the intro, they can have a positive or a negative effect. And more specifically, they can be minimizing or limiting as opposed to elevating or inspiring. And so I have a little list of words I'd like to share that some of the ones that are minimizing, and how the best thing to do is to replace them with ones that are more assertive, more inspiring and such. So shall I give you a couple?
Yeah, of course.
All right. So let's start with if. I feel as though during the pandemic, people started to say if all the time. They were saying, if I ever see my loved ones again, if I return to work, if we get to travel. And instead, so that was very, very, minimizes and limits the whole thought process and the beliefs. And should that person have changed it up and said when, it would have been much more inspiring and assertive, right? When we see our loved ones again, when we travel again, because it's more hopeful. Everybody knew we were going to. And so choosing to minimize it is not helpful. It's much more helpful to be hopeful and assertive. So that's one example. Another example would be when we speak in what I call wishy-washy terms, when we say we might do something or probably will do something instead of asserting I will take care of that, particularly in the workplace. No one wants to be talking about a project or something they're responsible for and be speaking about it in terms of sort of, kind of, maybe, right? So often we say, probably, well, we'll probably meet our goals, or, I might be able to get that to you by the end of the week. How helpful is that, right? Can you or can't you? So choosing the word will instead is much more assertive and confident.
So what do you, I know you have the book is out. What do you teach exactly in the book?
Thank you for asking. So we go through the chapters in my mind, well, from my perspective, very logically. It starts with yourself. So your internal narrative, which I didn't call it this in the book, but I now call it your personal podcast. So, we all have our earbuds in, our headsets on, and we're listening to podcasts. The reality is you're listening to your personal podcast sometimes 24/7. Well, certainly 3:00 in the morning, mine turns on. I'm like, who invited this person, right? So your internal narrative can pop on at any time. And when you think about that, you're the producer, the host, the narrator. You get to decide who comes on the show and who doesn't. And so allowing other voices to influence you, particularly ones that are telling you can't do something, you're not capable, that's very minimizing and limiting to you. And so I would say the first chapter is about how to take control of that voice, how to control the inner narrative and replace doubt with much more affirmation, right? So it starts there, and then it goes to words we use in the world at large. So then it goes to words we use with loved ones. A deep dive there into triggers and patterns that we can have with families, and then words we use with children. Huge difference it makes when we start to speak to children differently and affirm to them what they're capable of doing. We hold on to that. I'm sure you've heard of people before that say, well, I didn't think I could do that because my 4th grade teacher told me that I wasn't capable, right?
Yeah. And speaking of kids, how can someone, just like you said, at a young age, sometimes they probably heard some negative stuff said about themselves, and as they grow as an adult, it follows them. So
Right.
how could they reverse that? Like, sometimes they live with insecurities, and that voice is always there. So how could they switch that around, like do a 360 so it doesn't affect them in their everyday lives?
Right. Well, that's the number one question. And so I'm not a clinician. I'm not a clinical psychologist. I am a coach. And I take a lot of my clients through the process of reframing, let's say. So when you think about this negative thing that's going around in your head that somebody put in there once upon a time, my first question is, how does that serve you? I actually had a call today with a client that, they were saying, well, I believe this. And I said, okay, well, first I say, tell me more. And we dig deeper into what this person believes. And then we talk about how that belief serves them. And I don't know, without fail, like 99.9% or 100% of the times, the person says it doesn't. So at that point, it's a choice to give it up. So in the book, I say that the internal narrative, that voice is a choice. So it's not so much just give it up, like say, I'm not going to tell myself that anymore. It's that and replacing it with something that you are going to tell yourself, and an affirmation that you are going to tell yourself that is that leads towards your success, and a much more useful belief system. So that's how you change it. And you're right. I mean, it happens with children all day, every day. And I spend a good amount of time there. I talk about even how we create things with children, little things like if you're driving down the road and you have a boy and a girl in the back seat, and you say to your son, my son's name was Eric. If I say, Eric, look at that man, look at that guy on the backhoe, I'm making the assumption that there's a guy on the backhoe. Right. And I'm already starting to create these gender norms that may not be useful. Right. So it goes so deep. You can just go deeper and deeper into the cause and effect of our word choices. So I talk a little bit about what I call the isms: ageism, sexism, racism, microaggressions, the things that we say sometimes without enough thought. So it's a matter of saying, okay, this is what's in my head and this is what's in my heart. And my intention is good, hopefully. And so this is what comes out of my mouth. So really pausing long enough to determine what's in your head, what's in your heart, and how you can align those two things.
So what if when someone says, I hope, or I think things is gonna get better, how can I say that? What's the effect, and how could they change that? Really?
Yes, excellent question.
Because probably they don't see, like, it doesn't. Well, I'm not saying something negative, but I'm sure you're gonna say there's something to it when someone says I hope or I think or.
Mm-hmm. That's true. So you've probably heard this before. Hope is not a strategy. So sometimes when I hear leaders say, well, I hope we're going to do this next year. And I think, well, are you or aren't you? I mean, hope serves a purpose for sure, but it's not a strategy. And so the same with I think we can do such and such. You're not just saying to those who are listening to you that you're unsure. You're saying that to yourself. You're planting that seed to yourself every time you choose to say, I think, or I hope. You're really saying sort of kind of maybe I don't know. That's what you're saying. You're choosing to be uncertain. And I contend that that's typically not one's intention. Is we want to be certain and we want to meet our goals and we want to be successful. And so that starts with being very clear and setting those intentions. And when I say that, so I stopped about how the book goes, then it goes to work, and then it goes email, text, when you're not speaking, and then it ends with how we choose words, whether we're praying or, whatever it is, however you choose to connect to a higher being, right? And whatever that means for you, it's incredibly important to be clear, to set those intentions very, very clearly. It starts with how I say them to myself. So when I abandon hope and think and those uncertain words, and I get much more clear and intentional about what I desire and what I intend to do, and I speak in those terms, and when I'm meditating, when I'm praying, when I'm having moments of seeking guidance, I'm going to be more clear, much more clear.
And what do you think about affirmations? A lot of people say them. Do you believe in them, or how powerful? What's your take on that?
I do. I think I believe affirmations are the same as mantras, right? So if I have a mantra for the day, it could be for the day, it could be the month, it could be for the year, right? It's something that here's how I think about it. It keeps me centered. It keeps me centered in and moving forward towards something. So I'm a huge believer of affirmations, particularly when there's this repetitive thought that goes through my head that's a trigger for doubt. So I believe that's where affirmations come in the best. So for example, let's say that there's something that I'm unsure of, or I say, I'm not very creative. I'm not a very creative person. It's not my strong suit. Pretty much everybody's more creative than me, or I don't have a creative bone in my body. And then let's say that I, from a young age, have believed that. When I start to feel that trigger, and as it ends up, first I would say, is that really true? And what evidence do I have that I'm not creative? And if I was coaching, I'd ask for examples of things, decisions that were made that were creative or different or outside the box. And I'd get to the root of how that no longer serves, like I said earlier. So now that no longer serves. But in order to eliminate it, it needs to be replaced with something. So that's where the affirmation comes in. When the trigger happens, whether I'm in a meeting and I think, oh, I'm not as creative as the rest of these people, or something that starts to cause that trigger, that's when I have that affirmation at the ready saying, I am capable of being creative. I am capable of finding creative solutions, or something along those lines.
Okay. Have you seen, well, you've seen a lot of things in your journey. Have you seen like people who were speaking positively in their lives, the results in their life, like the way they were speaking, and other people that were talking negative, and you saw the results in their life? Have you seen that around in your journey?
Absolutely, all the time. And so you think about it as a spiral, right? The negative thoughts, the internal narrative, that voice breeds a negative spiral, and it just goes down, down, down. And then add to that when you allow others to speak to you negatively, and that's what prevents someone sometimes from changing, from being able to see a positive side, is that they have the negative thought themselves, and then they allow others to offer them more. So it layers and it becomes this downward spiral. On the other hand, even children, the children that are spoken to in a very affirmative, positive way, start to sort of spiral upwards, and then they surround themselves with other very positive, supporting people, and grow as an adult, somebody who spirals upwards towards their goals. I've seen it over and over again. I wish that I could remember right now, Richard. About a week ago, I heard on a podcast about, it's Tony Robbins or somebody very, very successful, wrote themselves $1 million check every day. Every day they woke up and they wrote $1 million. It's not Tony Robbins, but it's somebody along those lines. And that was their affirmation. I will make $1 million. And they wrote out this fake check, and until it came true. So there are different ways to manifest this way to affirm what you are intending to accomplish.
It's funny you're saying that, because I was listening to a podcast too, and on finance, and this guy was, because he's trying to reach financial prosperity, and he was saying that, he said in his mind he's already rich, he just didn't cash the check already.
So
he's rich in his mind, but he didn't cash in the check. He didn't deposit the check in the bank.
Yes, so, that's right. Yeah, love it.
I thought that was very powerful.
Yeah, then that's great clarity that individual has. Yeah, so that's another thing. Let's talk a minute about clarity and how we choose. We did a little bit about probably and might, and we're being unclear. One of the words that sticks out to me a lot is should, and people say it internally. They say, "Oh, I should really go on a hike tomorrow, or I should really get outdoors." Well, or we should really push out the date for this project, or what have you. Every time you choose the word should, I believe you're shirking or dismissing any kind of ownership. The should implies that somebody else has determined that should happen, right? So when I say I should go on a hike tomorrow, like, well, why is that? Like, I want to go on a hike tomorrow would be me owning that. But if I say I should go on a hike tomorrow, like, why? Because somebody else said I should, or, there's some rule about how often you should get out into nature. So I'm not owning the desire to be out and hiking. Same thing with moving a project. If I say should in the workplace, is that because someone at a higher level determined that would be the best thing to do? Or, is it a misalignment? Or do I own it? And if I own it, I'm not going to say should. I'm going to say, I want to do this.
So you were talking before about leadership and the way they speak. How would someone, how can I say that? Change the way they're speaking, so their team, their business can move forward. If someone has trouble communicating with their staff or with their partners? How would they do with that? How would they deal with that?
That's a great question. I think the number one thing is to ask more, tell less, particularly for leaders, right? The way, like right now, people want to talk about the great resignation and, people leaving their jobs left and right. Well, why are they leaving their jobs? It's fascinating to me that we have all these statistics and the leaders who are waving goodbye aren't so sure as to why they're leaving. When you ask really good questions, you're engaging your team member, your direct report on a deeper basis. So may I share some of the questions to ask? Is that all right?
Yeah.
Do we have time? So first of all, this is the rule of thumb. When you're intending to ask more and probe deeper and tell less, right? So be more interested as opposed to interesting. It works when you're at a cocktail party too. When you ask more questions, then you're more interested as opposed to more interesting where you're telling, right? So the rule of thumb is that your questions start with what, how, or tell me. Same thing happens with children when the children are coming home from school. And if you steer away from questions that get you a yes, no answer or the horrible answer of fine, how was school today? Fine. That's a how question, but you want to go deeper, right? What was the best part of your day? What made you laugh today? So the same thing applies with the employees. And I'm going to give you a list of them. What are you most proud of? What do you do? What do you do when you're not at work? So when we think about people leaving their jobs because they're not engaged, oftentimes that's because no one cares. Like they don't feel that anybody cares for them as an individual. So asking questions that tease a little bit more out of them sort of personally and getting to know them personally. And so what, how, or tell me, simple tell me is tell me more about yourself. All right. So you're probing and asking questions that help them sort of peel back the layers of what's important to them. Each what, how, or tell me question peels back another layer. And here's why that's important. So often the leader wants to say, why? Why is that project behind? Or why did you choose to do it this way? When we say why, it implies judgment. When I just asked those questions, did you feel just a little tinge of judgment there? If I said, Richard, well, why did you ask it that way?
Well, I'll feel something.
Yeah. So when you ask what or how, you're removing the judgment and you're simply peeling back the layers to get to the meat of what's important.
So what have you learned throughout, you wrote the book. What have you learned in your experience concerning like the way we speak, how people speak on an everyday life, and what have you learned and what have you seen?
Well, the biggest thing is that it's intentional. So it's intentional, meaning also that it's a choice. So the voice is a choice for the internal narrative, and it's a choice for me to speak respectfully and kindly to everyone, right? That's a choice. And that's part of what has been unraveling in societies these days is that I don't believe people are being intentional enough about those choices and about connecting what's in their heart and what's in their mind and what's in their heart. Sometimes they're just spewing what's in their mind without thinking about what's in their heart, which would lead them to be more kind. So the number one thing is that our word choices are exactly that. They're choices. And when we are much more aligned with what we intend, not just what I intend to say, but what I intend to impart to you, what my intention in this conversation is. So being much more clear about that. And some people, they're going at the speed of light and they'd rather just spew things out, or the leader is like, I'm in charge here. I'm going to say it how it is. I'm going to make this call. And then they'll double back if they have to, if they've hurt feelings or what have you. And it doesn't have to be that way. I'm a really fast talker. And if I can slow down enough to make that connection in a nanosecond between what's in my head and what's in my heart, and then speak with intention, if I can do it, anybody can. So that's what I've learned, is that there needs to be, we'd be in a better place if people were much more intentional about choosing their words and understanding the impact. And if you're not certain about the impact, ask. So if I said something to you and I thought, just by way of your body language, you just looked a little different or something, and I thought, wait a minute, that possibly didn't land the way that I intended, then I might ask you. I might say, Richard, my intention in sharing that with you was to help uncover this, or to, share with you or tell you my perspective on something. And, what did you hear? I might just straight up ask you, what did you hear? Because sometimes person says X and another person hears Y.
Do you think the surroundings of people affect the way we speak too?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because it's particularly in the workplace, what you permit, you promote, right? So if a leader permits gossip and hearsay and different things going on in the workplace, then they're in essence, they're promoting it. So what you permit, you promote. So if the workplace is toxic, if any of the isms are allowed, right? Sexism, ageism, racism, any of the isms are allowed, then if they're permitting it, they're promoting it. And so a person who comes to work and that's not really their intention can slip into, this is how it is here. This is how it is. And I spoke to a client the other day who is in a very male-dominated business, and that happens. I mean, there's just some work that women are drawn to, and some that men are drawn to. But that does not mean that it's okay to say demeaning things about women, right? Or to, do you see what I'm saying? It's like our job is to level the playing field by way of the words that we choose.
What advice would you have for people who have a tough time changing the way they speak? They have a hard time with, they're always speaking, well, not negatively, but they have the wrong words in their speech when they talk.
Well, the tricky thing is, I'm fresh out of pixie dust and I can't wave a wand, or I would, and we would all be choosing our words more wisely. The trick is, you can't do it all at once. So what I would advise to your listeners is, think, if you get the book, great, go through the list of words that are the ones that you are routinely choosing that might be minimizing to yourself or to someone else, and contemplate why that is. Like, what value does that word choice, how has that word choice served you in the past? And it's no longer serving you, it's minimizing you or someone else, and you're prepared now to abandon it and choose the replacement word. You can't do them all at once. Like I wrote this article, or I actually was interviewed for an article with Fast Company magazine, and they had this list of 10. Well, even if you wanted to, you just can't go like, and change and, say all 10 things differently tomorrow. Just choose one and work at it for a month. It takes a month to change a habit, more or less, 21 to 27 days. And so this is what I say to my clients. If my water bottle is on the right-hand side here, which it is, looks like the left to you, if I want to change one word, let's say I'm not going to use but, I'm going to replace but with the word and, which we haven't talked about yet, but that's a very positive thing to do. I know it's going to take a month, so I might change the water bottle over here as my visual reminder about the but. Right. So it's awkward for me to pick up the water bottle here because it's always over there. And that'll be my visual reminder that I'm committed to greatly reducing my use of the word but, so that I don't truncate or sever the conversation either with myself or with somebody else. I'm going to replace it with and, which will be much more collaborative, and it'll extend the conversation. So I'm going to create a visual habit changing way to do that. So that's what I recommend, is that you choose a word or a phrase or something that goes around in your head routinely, and say, that no longer serves me, and here's what I'm going to replace it with.
So in the book, there must be a lot of words, like there must be a long list of words that people say. And
it's interesting. They're kind of woven throughout. Like the I think is in there, and should has its own section. There's a section actually on when you're speaking to somebody who's grieving. And, so often when we're, particularly during COVID, and there was so much grief, and not just through the disease, but job loss and different things that were going on. And so often, this is the other thing that happens. There's people choose the wrong words, or they don't say anything. Like, sometimes when you're with somebody who's grieving, you think, I've been in that place where I think, I have no idea what to say. And I feel insecure about having the right words to say, so I choose to say nothing. And how helpful is that to the person who's grieving? So there's a section. So the sections kind of go not by word, they're sort of by way of what you might encounter in your typical life, right? So at home, out in the world, at work. And so it circulates through more around not individual words, but it gets there. It's more designed through our experiences that we would naturally have.
Okay. All right. This was very interesting. We finally record the third time the trilogy.
There you go.
Three for the trilogy. Where can people find you on the internet or social media?
Well, you can find me at LinkedIn. My name is spelled differently, so it's Terre, Terre, Short, Short. And so my email, feel free just straight up email me, Terre, Terre, at thrivinglc.com. And that stands for Thriving Leader Collaborative. That's the website, thrivingleadercollaborative.com, and find us on LinkedIn or Instagram. And we have almost daily tips, Richard. I'll be sharing this podcast there, all different ways that people can engage and gain more information.
Okay. I'll have the information in the show notes. And also, where can people find the book?
On the website. They can find the book on the website, but they can find it at Amazon or any of the organizations. I like bookshop.org. I wanted to check that it was .org, but bookshop.org. There's some indie online places to buy it as well, but also on my website, thrivingleadercollaborative.com.
Okay. Was this your first book, or you have other books that came out?
It was my first book, and I like how you say that, because I say first. See how affirmative that is? Mm-hmm. I don't say that's my only book. I say this is my first book. Yes. There will be more.
There will be more. Okay. I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Thank you.
So thanks a lot, Terre, for being here. I hope people found some value in this episode. So I was glad to have Terre on the show. So I really wanted to do the episode despite the technical issues that I had on my side. So it was my fault. So now it's done. And so thank you, Terre. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode. It was on words, why words matter. Make sure to check out her book on Amazon and on our website. And so my name is Richard. I was with Terre Short. And thank you for listening to this podcast. Welcome to A Better Lifestyle. And we'll see you on the next episode, everybody. Bye.